Content over everything.
When they don't have the collaboration of everyone else. This is why we have evolved to rein in our selfish urges, because we know through trial and error that if you get cast out into the wilderness, you're unlikely to pass on your genes. I'm talking about back in the Stone Age. We have the welfare state now, so some people can survive. But the point is, through history, we evolved these capacities in order to keep ourselves well with our community. Now, our ability to get on with a bigger and bigger group of people to whom we are not related stops at a maximum number of about 150. That's the Dunbar number. Across history, that's where groups would tend to stabilise. If they got bigger than that, they'd break into two and then go off separately. 150 people is about as big as you can get a group of communicating strangers, a group who can survive the droughts and famines together, a group who can endure attacks from other rival tribes, for example. But beyond 150 people, it becomes really, really difficult to keep track of who you can trust and who you can't. You get really confused. Our memory is limited. We've got an amazing memory for social things. And when we feel emotionally struck by something that someone's done, particularly when they make us feel annoyed that they dealt with us unfairly, those emotional memories are particularly sticky, particularly memorable. So our natural memory abilities are boosted when it comes to social interactions and the emotions the emotional overtones that they produce. If you want to create a cooperating group of humans that is larger than 150 people, it really helps if everyone has a shared belief in God. So this is why I say it's actually inevitable, this whole belief in the supernatural, because of the various design features of our brain. But the reason I think it's good is because if everyone believes there's an all-seeing eye, keeping an eye on everyone, making sure that everyone does right by the community, let's keep it simple, that adheres to those 7 deadly sins, avoid doing those very human urges, then you know that God will punish them, maybe not now, and there's lots of evidence of people sinning and not being punished now, but in the afterlife they'll be sent to hell instead of an eternity in heaven. It makes everyone much more likely to stick to the rules. Do you get me? Do you see where I'm coming from? So I think for years and years and years and years and years, religion has paid huge dividends. He's back in terms of regulating our ability, supplementing our natural ability to rein in our selfish urges. So I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. It's been a bit fractured, it's been a bit broken. I wrote a book called The Science of Sin. It comes out on the 12th of July. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Sorry man, I've been going for an hour. I can't.
No problem, mate. No problem.
Was it? Hey, thanks for making me feel like someone was following.
I don't know, I've seen rumors about it online.
Science of my book comes out on the 12th of July. Science of Sin.
Probably contributed to that camera.
Yeah, you trick you.
Jack Lewis.
I will write it down and try to find it somewhere in social media.
Yeah, I'm at,
Because my phone is already...
at Dr. Jack Lewis on Twitter.
Have you got YouTube?
No, my friend and I were just talking about that. We might set one up. Yeah?
Quite often, it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for stopping.
You'll get used to it. If you get heckled at things, you'll be good. You come up here more often. Definitely get a YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, we will. We're going to do it. Because this guy, I know a lot about neuroscience, but he just as a hobby knows more about this discussion of science and theology than I do. I was telling him earlier, I actively avoided reading everything that's been written about it, so I didn't want to accidentally get accused of plagiarism. Because you know how when you hear ideas, you're like, yeah, I really believe it. I didn't want to accidentally put those ideas into my book, so I've kind of ignored all of the major thinkers. And now the book's coming out, I might get stuck in.
Yeah, can you mention the name of the book as well?
Yeah.
I'm here
Cheers,
to,
buddy.
I'm here to open my YouTube channel. I see this
Oh, really?
professional guy. Yeah, I think it's the right place, the only place in the world to start. I think. Right, but the people,
It's definitely a good place.
you express themselves. Yeah,
Thank you. Take care. How you
Yeah.
doing?
What's your gig?
My channel's called Content Over Everything.
Yeah, cheers. DrJack.co.uk. Is that normal for people who are here? And I'm Dr. Jack. Yeah, no, so, Dr. Jack. So I wrote a book called Sort Your Brain Out, which is sort of like a user guide for the brain. That became a bestseller, which gave me the opportunity to write a book that I'm passionate about. And funnily enough, I first came up with the idea to do it because I was down here, and I got, because I roller skate up and down by the Serpentine, like I have done since childhood, and I always come by, when I get bored of that bit, I come around the corner and I just listen to all of this madness going on. And then I thought, I got involved in a conversation with these guys, and it was like a Muslim guy and a Christian guy, and they were having an argument, and then I answered a question out loud, and I was the only person who'd been listening, because he sort of recited something that was 60 seconds long, and he was like, where does it say here that Muslims should kill Christians? And I was like, nowhere. And he was like, his eyes lit up, and he dragged me into the middle, and then I started getting filmed again. And then, but the problem was he'd already identified me as an atheist, and the tract he was talking about is that jihad is about killing the unbeliever. And then I was looking around thinking, shit, are they going to kill me? Do you know what I mean? Because he was making an argument for brotherhood between Christians and Muslims. You know, he was trying to make an argument for peace, but accidentally implicating me as an unbeliever. I was literally thought I was going to go. So I skated off as fast as I could. No, genuinely, but that left me thinking about it. I've always thought people should be entitled to their own beliefs, and I enjoy hearing people coming and their beliefs give them real passion, and I love that. I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but I'm glad that they have it. But then I thought, man, science is really underrepresented down here, and I heard, I think this guy's political. I heard a Marxist down here making some interesting points. And I thought, okay, so politics is, and then so I thought I'm going to give it a go. And thanks for listening.
Very good one.
It was
Thank you so
wicked.
much.
Cheers.
Okay,
Where are you
thank
from?
Germany.
Germany. Whereabouts?
Hamburg.
Okay, cool.
No?
Well, when I was in Tübingen, my colleague was in Hamburg, and
Really?
I
Okay.
visited him, and we went out. It's a beautiful, international kind of vibe town.
Oh, not really international. But
No, but the port town. No, come. Hamburgers?
Hamburgers?
Much more open-minded than the Schwäbisch.
Yeah.
I was in Tübingen, man.
Okay, this is
Yeah, with the Kehrwoche,
Oh, yeah.
sweeping the pavements. I was in Tübingen, and this is where I first started thinking about this actually,
okay.
because it was so boring in Tübingen that I befriended a fraternity, but a very liberal fraternity, not one of the really old-fashioned ones. And it was their fraternity house was between the castle and the Kirche, the massive church in the old town of Tübingen. And I was just sort of got a bit of insight into the Germanic side of religion, and also because Tübingen was originally where theologians went to study, right? So theology and medicine, and I was sort of there as a neuroscientist, but some of the guys in that fraternity were theologians. We had some interesting discussions. So that there were lots of little along the way, little experiences that sent me down this. But you want to know the real truth? The reason I did this book is because neuroscience is so frustrating that when this brain area lights up again and again, you think, now I understand what the brain area does. You read other neuroscience from another branch, like say, go from neuroeconomics to social psychology neuroscience studies, and that brain area lights up again. It's like, well, hundreds of people in that branch of neuroscience think that this brain area does that. Hundreds over here think it does something completely different. It drove me mad. So I thought, it's a way, seven sort of topics where I can look into all of the neuroscience, all of the neuropsychiatry, all of the psychology on those 7 topics, and see if I can make sense of all the neuroscience literature. And I never dreamt the same brain area would come up again and again and again and again. That was luck. But I was already writing the book at that time, so it was lucky. It was really lucky that it worked out.
Interesting. Interesting. Very good. So, we
Some
buy the
wood.
book
Yeah.
and try to understand it, although it's English.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Also, we understood most of what you said, so should be okay.
It's written in plain English. If I've learned one thing about you Germans, it's that you always apologise for your English, but actually you just have punishingly high standards. Only excellence is good. Anything that's not excellent is ein bisschen schlecht.
Ein bisschen schlecht. Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Take care.
Schön dich kennenzulernen.
Danke gleichfalls. Very
Bye.
good.
See ya.
Really excellent.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Well, that's the kind of feedback you want. Thank you very much for listening.
I actually had a question. When you were mentioning, do I have to come in here?
Just so I can.
Oh yeah, take it. So you were kind of mentioning that we need, we have to believe in God basically, based on ancestry and.
No, I didn't say that we have to, but more that it's kind of inevitable if you give the makeup of the brain.
Inevitable, but I mean, I would take a different approach in that. Wouldn't you say that it's more important that we need a kind of overarching belief in something as opposed to it necessarily being religion? And then linked to that, do you see a future for religion in modern society?
Yeah.
I mean, we could equally have political views or scientific
Yeah.
beliefs that replace religion, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, neuroscience has very little to offer in terms of morality and what's right and what's wrong.
Okay.
Like, you can see what goes on in the brain when they do things that we've all collectively decided are right and wrong. So back in the old days, people went, like the religious thinkers looked upwards to the skies for inspiration, and then the philosophers kind of looked inwards, deep introspection, to try and find the ultimate truths of what's right and wrong in terms of human behaviour. But sure, there are many other ways to create a set of rules where if everyone followed it, it would make the world a better place. I'm not worried about the afterlife. I'm worried about making life better for I'm kind of like a utilitarian, Jeremy Bentham. The greatest all decisions should be made according to, more or less, to what produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people.
Okay, so that, exactly. So saying that what can be determined as good and bad behavior can be kind of. You can determine this based on outcome, right? So in the
Totally,
like,
I'm saying let's take an empirical approach. Let's look at all of the guidance that we've been given throughout history from all walks of life, and then actually test it, find out what works, find out what doesn't work. So let's take for example prayer. Scientific studies have been done on if a congregation prays for someone to get better quickly after their operation, do they get better quicker or not? The point is, so long as they think they're being prayed for by the whole congregation, even if they're not actually being prayed for, there's a benefit. But placebo, a lot of time people use the word placebo to say, oh, it's just placebo. Placebo is incredibly powerful mind over matter. So that's again why I think that belief is really important. If you strongly believe in something, then that belief will trigger that positivity.
So the belief doesn't matter in itself, right?
In the same way. The nature of the belief doesn't matter. So long as the belief makes you more optimistic than you would be otherwise, it can help you to trigger brain pathways that actually help you heal quicker, that actually help you...
Like eating chocolate, right?
Well, eating chocolate actually is chemical as well as... Yeah, but I take your point.
Yeah, exactly, right. So as in...
But black chocolate is like a drug. It's similar to, like, drinking alcohol, smoking cannabis.
The outcome's the same.
There's
right?
a chemical.
It triggers. There's of course, like there's a physiological, like there's a chemical, but there's also the feeling of.
If you say chewing gum.
Yeah.
If you believe that chewing gum is going to make you run faster, then chew gum, because the belief in that alone will make you run faster. So I just think belief is incredibly important. I wouldn't want to take anyone's belief away from them. If it makes them happier than they would be otherwise, if it gives them a sense of control over the uncontrollable that they wouldn't have otherwise, then that will help them to harness placebo, to move forward with greater confidence and purpose. My problem is when one person's belief system says that the other belief system is wrong and therefore they should be killed. That kind of stuff, I don't believe in complete freedom of thought. I think the line should stop where it starts to tell us, I'm offering this information and people can do with it as they wish. If people don't want to believe it, that's fine with me. But I think people should offer, not insist.
Sure.
Do you see what I mean?
No, I understood. I just didn't quite understand. I joined a bit late, but I didn't quite understand what your aim was, at least. I understood what you were saying.
The aim is to say, here's science, here's religion. To believe in this, you don't have to reject that. To believe in this, you don't have to reject that. There's ways you can bring them together.
As in, I understand, like from a moral perspective. Yeah, sure. Like the morality and and also this is something I mean, I'm not particularly religious, but I found with friends I know who are religious, I find that they tend to compartmentalize their religious side and their kind of logical reasoning and look at those completely differently. Like there's a morality and there's, I mean, the actual belief in things that are just plainly unscientific, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of separate those things out
Yeah.
for like, say, okay, I believe in religion because it offers these things in my life that is beneficial.
Yeah.
And then, but I don't actually believe that, like, you know, there's a talking snake or a woman was made from a rib or something like that.
But that's it. I think most modern liberal religious people, they realise that narratives were used to help make points, because that's the best way to reach the largest possible number of people. But the exact precise details of every aspect of the story isn't the point so much as the bigger, take a step back, the overarching kind of moral of the story is the thing that really is trying to be got across to people. I'm saying
the issue is when it's actually taken.
It's a shame where people take everything completely literally for one reason or another. And you know, it's, again, I'm always very careful not to point the finger at any specific religion, because there's orthodox, you know, versions of every religion, and that's the bit which is kind of, you know, that's where it tends to get a bit too literal and you lose the benefit. Here we go again.
Yeah, the weird thing is, the only people
So
who
do
take
I
it-
have to come to Jesus Christ the Lord? Is that basically the game you're... Oh, I thought it was that. I thought that was the game you're playing. Allahu Akbar, Jesus Christ the Lord, the same shit. And you place it in the name of neurology. That's what you should be locked up in Broadmoor. You should be kept away from children. Yeah?
Or you at UCL?
Yeah. That's where I did my PhD.
That
What
is,
are you studying?
The
mechanical
UCL
engineering.
actually.
Cool.
is
Oh, you got a lovely new
psychiatric
building, haven't you?
ward
Well, I mean, I graduated.
A long time. But had they put the
sponsored by people who are
Hello.
interested
Had they put the thing up?
lunatics.
The big beautiful building they were building when I first 2002 I started.
Oh,
my,
okay,
was
that's
it-
probably why.
was it
Then I
big
must
and
have been in that
beautiful?
building, yeah.
Was
At
it
that
big and
time?
beau- it's
Yeah.
big,
Probably
it's
afterwards,
big,
yeah.
beautiful.
yeah, I liked it.
It's still fairly recent.
It's small,
Anyway,
beautiful.
Cheers, lovely to meet you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks
All
for
the best.
thanks for stopping by. Cheers. Hello. Oh, you were an attentive listener too.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Are you also from Germany?
Yeah, we're also from Germany.
Where are you from?
Yeah.
Nuremberg.
Yeah.
Nuremberg.
We like Germany. Yes. Yeah, it's very good, Germany.
We like it too there.
No, I don't. I'm not going to Germany. And so far as I'm concerned, you can take him back with you. Yeah. Yeah, you can do your goose step elsewhere.
Welcome to London.
No,
Thank you.
he can't welcome you to London because he is not from London.
What are you talking about? I'm born and bred Londoner, you nuts.
No, there you go. Did you hear what he said? He's not from London. He was born here. The question is, how was he born? And I suggest it was the leg over. Yeah. Oh yes.
My mum is from West London, my dad is from East London, and I was born in London.
East West.
So I don't know what
East
planet
West
you live
is-
on, mate,
East,
but I am a Londoner.
East West fucking's best. You can't fool me. Sorry.
Don't apologise. You are beyond.
Go to
Forgiven.
Germany. They'll love you there.
They did love me there. Now I'm back.
Imagine. I can imagine.
Opinion from Germany? Really, really good. Good. Okay. There we go.
Yeah, you don't like us, so bugger off. Get lost.
So I suspect that man was dealt a horrible blow at some point in his life. Do you know what I mean? And that's another thing, like the whole forgiveness thing. I think it's really important not... So you know what I say at the end of the book? That man probably lacks a sense of community. Like, so let's say, for example, his mum was a bit neglectful or overbearing, and then he didn't really have a good sense of self, and then he behaved a lot in a way that was a little bit annoying to people around him, so he'd get rejected, fell in with a bad bunch of people, started increasing... Oh, hang on, let me just save this. So what does someone like that do if they feel alone and they don't have a sense of security, a sense of
Oh, hang on. Why can't I save it? Okay, this is really important. I save this. What's it? A speaker's call and. So where does he go if you're starting from a complete standstill? You've got no one. How do you get a group? Get feeling like you belong. So he probably just comes down here and gets some laughs, but those relationships don't progress from week to week. Science can't help him. Science says he's just going to be a homeless bum for the rest of his life, and it's that sad, tough. It's a war of attrition, and some people succeed and some people fail. But this is why I think you can't turn your back on religion, because he can, if he eventually got, hit a real low, when everyone else had rejected him, he could walk into a church. He was like, brother John, please come sit down. And then they come pray with me. He'd hold people's hands and they pray and they say nice things to each other, and they'd have that sense of ritual. And then by going every week, he would slowly feel like, I felt alone, I felt anxious, I felt the social pain of being isolated, and it had an effect on his physical and mental health. But religion can help him. Science can't. And that's why I don't think science doesn't have all the answers. I think some of the ancient religious, the community building of religion, we can't replace it. Going to the pub for the pub quiz once a week, it's not quite the same as being in an environment where you're reminded that it's important to be good to your fellow man. Here's an opportunity to volunteer your time and go and help people who are in need. So instead of being the one in need, he gets that sense of agency that comes from helping others. That's part of the greed story that I missed. The
responsibility aspect.
Well, we have a natural desire to give to others, to help others. Yeah. And when you do it, it makes you feel good. That's your reward for being sort of altruistic, if you like. And if you're altruistic and you get this positive feedback, then you start to do it more and more and more. But someone like that, if they're damaged along the way, whenever they did take a leap, they were generous to others, and it was never reciprocated, or they were made to feel stupid for doing it, then you learn it doesn't work. You lose faith in the whole system. Yeah. And so, but the only
you can only have meaning through giving.
Yeah, the only people.
Part of meaning is giving.
The only people that can get that guy back on track are religions. Scientists don't have the time or the patience. Hello, Phil. How you doing? This is Alex. Did you have a question, or are you just having fun?
No, we're just having fun listening.
Okay,
to you.
good. I'm glad you liked it. Yeah. Right.
It was good. It was exactly an hour or an hour and.
Give me your feedback.
Feedback.
Yeah, come on. And seeing as he's filming, you might as well. So this guy. Actually, can you come around here so I get paranoid that I'm going to lose the content of this? So this is my friend Alex. Can I do what you want? All right. So this is Alex Francis. He is an old friend of mine, and he's a very wise guy. So I'm a neuroscientist who dug around in the neuroscience literature to try and find pearls of wisdom that could help me make sense of 7 deadly sins. Just religious teachings that I chose pretty much at random as an example of the wisdom of religion. This guy's been doing it in his spare time. So I'm interested to see what his critique is. What did I miss?
I don't know if you missed anything that I could tell specifically, but what I think is the core of it, the most interesting thing, is that attempt to find a synthesis between religious truth and scientific truth. And what's really fascinating, if you take the 7 deadly sins, which are a sort of embodiment of an article of faith, it's a realization over time, over many thousands of years, that these sins
crop up over and over again
and routinely damage humans over the lifespan of any human being, whether peasant or king, right? But what's interesting is that when you go into the neuroscience, it reinforces there's a specific part of the brain that keeps firing that one thing. And what that shows is that science can serve religion in that sense, and vice versa. And the two types of truth can come over one another. And I think that's very important for today's world. Because although science is powerful, I think the West is beginning to lose the religious substructure that actually creates the psychological stability of the culture. Because like you said, right, these things fire in the brain, and it's been identified that causes psychological stability is when you keep the 7 deadly sins under control. If we forget about religious truth and we only have the science, we lose the religious substructure.
Science can't guide morality.
In the first place.
Science has no power to guide morality.
It doesn't
Humans
tell you
have
how
to
to
decide
act.
that collectively.
Exactly, like we were saying before, like if your mum is dying of cancer and you're trying to look after her, it's not going to help you that you understand the biochemistry of cancer and how it's affecting her vital organ, and she may have 6 months to live and we can tell that because of that. That's not going to help you. It's not going to help you to act.
That offers no solace.
Yeah, it's not going to help you console your sister when she's crying, right? But religion is an ancient blueprint of how to act when these horrible moments of suffering occur, and they come to everyone, and one day you die yourself, and most people don't die well, right? So archetypally, like that's what Jesus was. The man dying on a cross, carrying the weight and the suffering of life. I mean, forget about whether he existed or not, or whether he was divine. That's an archetypal image of someone voluntarily carrying the pain of life. And that's all it means. It's an archetype. It's an archetype.
It acknowledges
it's metaphor.
that there is pain in life in the first place.
Yes.
And that's wrong. Because in the conclusion of The Science of Sin, available in all good bookshops, 12th of July 2018, that I concluded that I can't remember who the quote came from. It was originally attributed to Gandhi, but apparently it's not true, and I'm going to paraphrase it anyway. It's that peace is not the absence of turmoil or conflict, it's the ability to manage it.
Yeah. And actually taking it on, because
and so you have to accept that you will have social pain. And so my sort of, what I took away from the Science of Sin investigations was that it always seems to come back to personal emotional pain. That's what inspires and triggers those antisocial behaviours.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to start. I hadn't even thought of that, with Jesus being the sort of the admission that human life involves a lot of suffering.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that the archetypal image of Western civilization is a man dying on a cross, is a man bearing suffering.
Oh yeah, so not just dying under torturous conditions.
Yeah, but voluntarily accepting and carrying the weight.
Yeah.
That's actually the crucial point. And when people accept the pain of life and voluntarily carry it,
I see, so it's like an allegory.
They take the weight. It's all metaphor. It's all archetypal. This is why taking these things literally is totally unhelpful. Literalism is an Enlightenment phenomenon that we essentially sort of made up 400 years ago. We assume everything is material, as scientists do. But religious truth comes from a time before the Enlightenment, when people thought in pictures and stories and metaphor. Like when they say Jonah lived in the belly of a whale for 5 days.
Hang on, Phil.
No one
get involved?
No one really believes that, literally.
Get involved. So this guy is a friend of my brother's, and they went to a Catholic school. So he's been indoctrinated in all of this stuff. Let's cut. Can we cut for a bit? Just go silent. Okay, fine. Well, let's just just go silent. We've seen this guy before.
Holy is the mother
let's not talk.
of the Lord.
Silent.
Yeah? It's the same old shit, isn't it? Liar, fuck off. You're not a neurologist, you're a mental health patient. Fuck off. Bloody racist cunt. Fuck off. Get lost. Don't come back.
Oh no.
Go and live in Tehran.
He likes Tehran. He's mentioned it a few times.
I reckon that stuff has been said to him a lot, and he just repeats it to others. The internal turmoil and pain broadcast to the world at random. But come. What did you think about this chat? You've heard this chat. Do you believe in God?
I don't know. I am super agnostic. I was raised a Catholic, and to me, everything made a lot more sense when you have that framework. And actually, I'm almost scared to move away from it, because I think we all need that.
It's like a crutch.
It is a crutch, and it's very difficult, and I think you express it very well, that when we do move away completely from that crutch that we have, as humans, have had for thousands of years, what do we replace it with? And it seems to me that in today's society we are losing our faith, but we are stepping into chaos, and we have nothing else to prop it up, and society breaks down. And religion plays a really important tool in making society work.
And you can't underestimate that substructure, because the thing is, so look at it in a Darwinian perspective. Given that our neurobiology has been evolving since Homo sapiens started,
or before.
Given that we think in stories, we communicate in patterns. Even our dreams come from our mind in this sort of strange archetypal, metaphorical form, right? We have evolved along this storytelling line, right? And those stories make up the religious substructure of what we have. And you know, with the greatest respect to pure atheists, it's atheist naivety to assume that their morality exists because they just invented it. Like an atheist who's come from a Christian culture will, not by coincidence, have what is roughly a Christian morality. An atheist who's raised in a Hindu environment will have a morality that's roughly speaking Hindu. And an atheist that may have grown up in a Muslim environment may, lo and behold, have something approximating the Muslim. That's not a coincidence, because you can't extrapolate yourself from the Darwinian cultural moral evolution of your species going back to the caveman. And all religion is a sort of a blueprint and a documentation of those truths, those psychological truths. How to act when your mum is ill, how to deal with the jealousy you feel when you see the woman you love, flirting with another, how to deal with these things. These are documented in every religion, and all these stories, they keep appearing in every religion. It's because they're psychologically deeply human, and religion is the documentation of that. And that's all it is, right? So when an atheist gives good moral advice on how to look after your mum, if they really believe that they just made that up themselves, that's not true. They've acquired it because their mum taught them, and then their grandmother taught their mum, and they go in whatever cultural tradition they came from, and that's the religious substructure. So when we start destroying religion and we completely dismantle it, we're literally removing the foundation from our reality. And that's what we're suffering from, and what you can call that is chaos. The order is being lost, and therefore the chaos will grow. And you can be both scientific and religious and understand that both go together. Like they don't need to be divorced. And I think that's actually the crux power.
That's the whole point,
of what your
It's
story
funny how
is.
the three of us all arrived at exactly the same conclusion through completely different avenues.
Yeah, do you know why we did?
Well, not completely different.
Do you know why we did? Because it's true.
Well, because you can arrive at nonsense.
When many people come to the same conclusion, you can start to say that there's something true about it.
Well, no, your voice can be on film. So.
Go for it.
No, please, be the character as a counterpoint. We're all cut from the same mould.
Isn't that why you agree with each other?
We came
no.
different
I
dimensions.
would agree.
Go on then, talk.
Go for it.
Well, I'm not sure what the conclusion is that...
He's trying to say we've all chanced on the truth from different directions.
Right, but my point is that the truth is not religious. So if we embrace truth, we embrace chaos.
Well, I don't understand.
My point is that sometimes the truth is so painful that we choose to invent things, and we need.
You see it as escapism, as opposed to.
We need something, because the truth is horrible, and we're all going to die, and that's the end of it. And maybe there is no more. We need something. But then I find myself in a conflict, because I try and live a life of truth. We would all like to think what's true is good. But I think in this particular debate, the truth can be quite painful. So we say, okay, I don't want to go there. Otherwise, I would just be going into chaos.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Well, that's the thing. I see people, like one of these people, who are probably happier than I will ever be.
Yeah.
And I wrestle with this daily. Should I just say, okay, science, reason, forget it, I'm just going to live a life of ignorant bliss?
I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people who are atheists their whole lives, I've seen it on the sort of professional speaking circuit over and over again. People get progress through their 40s and 50s, and when they get to the end of their 50s, maybe into their 60s, they suddenly start going to church every day. I'm like, why? Because I guess when you're getting closer to no longer being able to put on a back burner all of those uncomfortable thoughts about, you know, existential angst and the fact that it's all going to come crashing to an end and what happens afterwards. I think it's natural for people to start casting about for other explanations, because they think, well, it can't just be about my few decades on Earth and that's just it. Like, that seems so purposeless. And because we're big brain creatures, we search for a higher purpose, and we can each find different versions of it, but the ones that are most seductive and that have stood the test of time are the ones that promise something in the afterlife.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean every atheist. There are many atheists that do die atheists, and that is a...
No, sure. But I'm saying that there's a natural tendency to, having pushed it away for a long time, to eventually let your guard down and say, look, like, ignorance is bliss. This is a much more comfortable place to be.
It's not pushing away. The last thing atheism is pushing away dying and being turned into nothing at the end of the day. That's the last thing it is. That's the thing it covers and focuses on, probably one of the most. Science is about facts and things. It's total separation between the two. Religion, what it tends to do is find people that become vulnerable and desperate, and the old and the elderly, unfortunately, do become old and do become desperate, and then the church comes along, exploits them, gets their money, tells them a story, believe the story, it's going to be okay. That's what the church does.
I don't think it's only that. It can be that, and it often is.
Oh, thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, people use powerful things for negative reasons all the time. But what's interesting about that is that the thing they always use is something inherently powerful. So it's like fire can be a warm, giving thing. You can light things with it. You know, you can treat it carefully. But when it's a forest fire, it's utterly destructive. What's at the core? The fire itself is not a problem. It's the use of fire. So, for example, Darwinism is an excellent blueprint, and it's an amazing theory. Eugenics, on the other hand, is a bad reading of Darwinism. It's a corruption of Darwinism. And just as the misuse of religious truth is a misreading of religious truth. So religious truth has value.
Because you can have religious scientists, and it is religious scientists which are the people that
did the eugenics.
It wasn't atheist scientists.
But religion per se, religion fundamentally speaking, it's not necessarily.
Faith is I don't disagree if anyone's having faith. But when another individual who's very wealthy comes along, very clever or very something, head of a church comes along, and they steal your wealth, faith, and then they ask you to pay for it. And then what they do is horrendous genocide across history. All right, I think we agree.
And that's the misuse, and that happens all the time. I mean, that's the powerful misuse of it. But it's not intrinsic in it.
It's the last that describes what I've just said. Describes the last 1,000+ years of history, possibly even more. It doesn't describe today. It describes today as well. What doesn't describe the last 2,000 years, 3,000 years of history is how atheism has always been in our culture for 3,000 years. Philosophers from Greek were talking about it, but they were then overwritten and wiped out by people who were fanatical and
exactly.
And destroyed not only
it's the fanatics and the literalists and the extremists.
And they're the people who dominate religion. So therefore, rewrite the Bible.
They're not necessarily
to exclude that. Rewrite the Quran to exclude this possibility. Easily done.
I think we have to, as a state, step in.
Not as a state, as people.
Tell me
I mean, that's what was happening. The Bible was written by men and women. The Quran was written by a man. Possibly women. That's probably very dubious, that one. I know, it was dubious, but women do exist, and my point was women do influence men. That is a reality. That men influence women. It's a cycle thing. But my point, and the Jewish Bible as well, which I'm sorry, just the one thing. That needs to be written. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Yeah, that needs to be written, and it needs to have human rights at the heart of it. We have a human right to exist, and exist not as an animal or a slave. When I say animal, I mean a slave. But I'm going to use the term animal. No, we have a right to exist better than an animal. We have a right to exist as human beings. Have your faith. glorify your faith, but at the end of the day, don't be seduced by very few billionaires, trillionaires, and elite and very clever men and women that just want to burn everything. And that's it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
What's your name? Alex. My name's Dust. An absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'll be on my platform later on, so hopefully you might scoot over.
Yeah, why not? Where are you going to be?
Huh? Where are you going to be? You'll definitely hear my voice, don't worry about that. That ain't going to be a problem. But I'll be talking about democracy and how it needs to be given to the world. That package with human rights. And people should be allowed to have their faiths in peace and harmony like any other idea. So there you go.
Well, good luck.
All the best. Oh, we're talking about global warming as well.
Right.
And this,
Looks like you're the man now.
Huh?
yeah. Sorry.
I think we're.
I thought that was really interesting. No,
Yeah.
I was just finding out what this is about. It's interesting. It's like
What is it?
No cutting. Hang on, I wrote it down. Don't tell me. Bad memory. Wait, don't tell me. Content on something. Wait. Content over everything. Content over everything. So you just let it run, and you get the whole thing. And if the viewer wants to fast forward, they can fast forward. But you don't cut out the bit where someone comes and acts in a really annoying way. But yeah, so what's the conclusion? Concluding thoughts.
I think it was interesting what you said before about it.
I thought it was
religion itself
beautiful because it's from the heart, like that you think about this stuff every day. It's almost like you sort of suffer in silence in the whole.
Yeah.
I've learnt too much to buy the Bible, like all of it. Yet I can see the psychological peace I would get if I just abandoned myself to it.
Yes, but I've almost come too far now. I know too much that it would be very difficult to just chuck it all and say, okay.
Can I get your email? Sorry, too much.
Yeah, sure.
I embrace it all now because I know that's not true.
Yeah.
And
No,
you know, would you rather live
Maybe
a
the
life of truth
antagonism
or
is
happiness?
a problem of literalism. The thing always fascinates me. The people who take religious texts literally are religious extremists and atheists.
That's interesting. Right.
Atheists and religious extremists are the only people that really read the Bible literally. And when you read it literally, it immediately causes rational problems, like Jonah living in the belly of a whale for 5 days, right? If you literally believe that, you're either insane or you're doing a great disservice to what is probably a much deeper form of truth, which is what the Old Testament was actually saying in that story.
Right.
I mean, that story essentially means if you go in the wrong direction for long enough, you end up in a bad, dark, submerged, scary, unknown place, the belly of a whale. And then when you start to sort your stuff out, you'll float back to the surface and you'll start going that way and things will become better. And the ultimate example of a great life where you don't lie and you do what you plan on doing when you wake up in the morning and you make your family better and you make your life better, the ultimate archetypal example is a heroic state, which then the ultimate example of a hero would be someone like the Buddha or Jesus or whatever, right? That is an archetype. It's not true in the scientific material sense, but it's absolutely true in the deep human desire to be better. I mean, heaven and hell. That crazy guy who's wandering around here with so much bitterness and vitriol. He listen to him.
It's another one.
He is currently living in hell. If you look at it metaphorically, the social pain, the psychological stress that he's under could easily metaphorically be described as hell. If you go in the wrong direction and you drink too much and you destroy your relationship and you lie to your partner and you cheat and so on, you end up in a place that's so bad that you end up roaming around Speaker's Corner with bile and hatred in your eyes and you're just ranting at people, right? That's hell. And you go in the opposite direction, you try to be virtuous and you do the right thing and and there are examples of these people like Gandhi and so on and so forth. They're going in a heroic, in a transcendently heroic place. That's another metaphor, it's an archetype. And we know it to be true. When you lie to someone, you feel it in your heart. When you lie to someone you love, it hurts. Even if you do it for good reasons. But when you tell the truth, even when it's hard to tell the truth, you feel slightly rebuilt. It's a human truth. And you really feel it deeply and psychologically. And that's what these religious stories are. That's what heaven and hell is. So you don't. I think the tension you're having is the literalism of an atheist struggling with the religious truth in your heart. And it's the antagonism between the two which are conflicting. You know? And what's interesting about his story, taking neuroscience to explain the 7 deadly sins, is to show that one type of truth is helping to decipher the other type of truth. But religious truth is metaphorical and archetypal. If you take it literally, you'll run into problems as a rationalist, because it's just nonsense if you read it literally. And, you know, yeah. So I think that you can ease that tension through that.
What about on
This
death?
is my
though?
second time ever. Yeah.
Well, how to tolerate death?
Well,
I'm
that you have
I'm a
to
scientist.
embrace. I agree. Day to day, the two can coexist, and they actually they can help develop your thinking on both sides. But once you die, it's black and white. Either you're dead and that's it, or you're dead and you've gone to heaven. So at that point there, you do have to embrace the literalism of religion.
Well,
and that's the ultimate jump.
It depends how far you want to take the metaphor. And it depends what you mean by God. And it depends what you mean by transcendence. Like, what is God? So you could easily argue that Jesus is your conscience. Jesus is your conscience, and when you're doing something wrong, the thing in your head that tells you, "No, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be lying to that person." Or you shouldn't. The conscience in your mind, you could easily argue, your ally is a Jesus-like force that constantly tells you what the right thing is to do, right? So when you start approaching death and you approach the existential cliff where you know you'll fall off, trying to reconcile these things to understand whether you're surrounded by love, or people are caring for you, or have you done the right thing, or there are ways of reconciling it metaphorically. You don't have to necessarily go, I'm literally going to physically move onto a cloud in the sky and see all my relatives for eternity. I mean, as comforting as that might be,
I always thought it never bothered me not existing before I was born. So why in the world would it bother me not existing after I'm dead? That gives me consolation. That consoles me.
If you've readied yourself psychologically over your life by trying to do the right thing and understanding the deep human truths of things, and if you're well fortified enough and you've supported yourself enough psychologically, philosophically, and so on, then when you get to death, hopefully it'll be more tolerable. And again, that's the archetype of Jesus. Voluntarily carrying a cross, knowing you're going to suffer and go through the pain, and doing it anyway. That's a meaningful life, tolerating the suffering of life. That's the whole point of it. It's like, it's not that you escape death by going somewhere else. It's that you accept and are able to tolerate death and go into death with
equanimity.
Yeah, and a sense of meaning rather than a sense of terror or fear. But that takes a great deal of time and telling the truth and doing the right thing and having a meaningful rather than a frivolous life, you know?
Because it's funny, you two probably have genuinely sort of, this has come forward in the schedule for both of you, because you don't know it, but I do, that both of you have suffered the loss of a parent recently, and you've had to go through it, and so you've probably found yourself questioning it more than someone that hasn't had to go through bereavement. You know, like, because you can stick your head in the clouds and just distract yourself with small, I have purpose from day to day, week to week, month to month, or goals that you're aiming for. But all of that counts for naught when you have to suffer a bereavement of someone you deeply, deeply love.
Yeah.
And then it makes you take a step back from the coalface and think, what is this all about? And, I think it's almost like, how do you give people a wake-up call to get them to think seriously about this stuff without having to wait until the die is cast and someone ends up kind of coming to the natural end of their life.
But it's precisely those events that can explain the truth of it the most clearly. I've said before, like, the saddest thing I've ever experienced is having to look after my mum and helping her hopefully to die well. But it was without question the most profoundly meaningful thing that I've ever done. And people talk about, the quest of happiness, and happiness is the goal of life. It's like, try being happy when your mum has died. You're not going to be happy. And then people go, oh God, there must be something wrong with me, I'm not happy. It's like, you should be unhappy. but you can also have the most meaningful, heroic experience of your life by stepping up and doing the right thing and looking after a loved one and helping them to die well. So and then it's like, okay, so if that's the meaning of life, it's like carry the load, carry the suffering, carry the cross, metaphorically speaking, right? And the more you carry it, it's like going to the gym. The more you lift weights, the stronger you get, the more your muscles react to the load and are able to lift more, psychologically, emotionally, and everything else.
That's part of the
exactly
narcissism
the same
story,
way.
actually. The fact that narcissists, the sin of pride, aren't born, they're made, but that certain parenting styles can make it more likely that a child will turn into a sort of narcissistic person. And one of them is where the kid can do no wrong. Oh, my Bobby, my Sarah, she's amazing. And it's always positive feedback. But be nice to your kid. You want your kid to like you. You want them to not have a tantrum. Be good, be nice, be nice. But then you don't give them the guidance to show them the difference between good conduct and bad conduct. So that then they learn through trial and error that it doesn't matter how I behave. Yeah. I am entitled to love and positive things no matter what, because I am special. You can see how any young mind would naturally conclude, well, whether I behave well or badly, I still get ice cream whenever I want.
Yeah.
And so
you're stealing their agency.
But the counterpoint to that is so the end thing is those narcissists suffer the inevitable inner turmoil that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
It's unavoidable. The suffering of life is unavoidable.
But narcissists are made, and then they end up suffering all of that social pain more acutely.
Yeah.
That social pain then drives those unpleasant behaviours that are antisocial and lead to that person being pushed away by those around them, worsening the sense of isolation, worsening the sense of inner turmoil, and then leading to more and more sort of exhibitionist tendencies. I'm the centre of attention, look at me, look at me, look at me, like someone I could mention who's wandering around here drunk. But look at me, because he wants some kind of positive feedback, because you don't have that inner sense of, I know that I am worthy of love, irrespective of my conduct, but at the same time, so the counterpoint to that is, if you bring a kid up well and they don't turn into a narcissist, then they can govern their own behaviour. They know what you have to do to maintain group affiliation, how pro-social acts mean that others will be more positively inclined to spend time with you. But this is all about, so those people who are not narcissistic understand that, well, sometimes, you feel like you should do these things and you want to act on that social pain, but there's nothing wrong with that social pain. Like, everyone gets a measure of it. Yeah. And it's all about what you do. So that, that Milton quote, you can make a heaven or hell of life on earth. It's how you interpret those perceptions that leads to positive emotions or negative emotions. And if we are given the right tuition and we're taught, as in just trial and error through life, you're like, well, okay, you've fallen over and hurt yourself, but you okay? If you're in pain, fine. We'll kiss it better or whatever. We'll give it a rub. But you can choose, child, whether you bawl your eyes out or whether you just get on with it. And quite often that pain is a shock, and it means that you have to take note of it. But what you do with that sort of sensory signal is actually down to you. And again, that's why I think you shouldn't throw religion out with the bathwater, because religion's quite good at enabling people to think, no, I can address this event that's happened that I have no control over. If I adopt this belief system, then I don't have to be crushed by it for years and years. Like bereavement, typically takes months and months and months. Some people, if they allow it to take over years and years later, it can really be in the forefront of their mind still, like a sort of post-traumatic stress disorder type of thing. But given, with wise people around you saying, no, it's fine, come my child, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the good times of that person you loved, and you can be guided through your pain by others, or those people can say, take that pain and use it to cast down the people that don't believe in the same thing as you. You know what I mean? But that pain is always there. It's just how we manage it.
And also teaches you about the antithesis. I mean, another great problem, another common bad parenting thing is the Oedipal mother complex. The sort of devours and protects the child and wraps them in cotton wool so that they never experience any pain.
Yeah.
So the default position is, I'm going to protect my child from ...
Yeah.
whatever dangers there are in life.
Which
right?
means they don't experience that the dangers can actually
Yeah.
make you stronger.
Well,
you don't have to have a
it's
perfect
the
childhood
only way,
to turn
it's
out a
the
good
only
adult.
way to become stronger.
Yeah, yeah,
And
agreed.
again, it's the concept of lifting a load.
Yeah.
Right. So when someone has a phobia, for example, and they go to a therapist to fix the phobia, like if they had a phobia of
Spiders.
Of spiders,
Common.
right? Yeah. So then it's like you have a profound phobia of spiders. What you don't say, or what a therapist never says, and this is just the endless literature of science and even common sense, that you don't say to them, right, I will guarantee to you that you will never be exposed to a spider ever again. I'm going to put you in a box, in a room, wrapped in cotton wool, you're never going to see it again.
Yeah.
That's the solution. Just intuitively, you know that's wrong. But the way you break arachnophobia is to say, all right, so could you hold a spider in your hand? And they say, absolutely not, there's no way I'm ever going to do that. And then it's like, okay, could you look at a picture of a spider? And they say, no, I can't even look at that. And you go, all right, well, could you think about a spider? Could you tolerate a conversation about a spider? And then they go, well, okay, maybe. So then you have a conversation about a spider, and you do it for, say, 3 or 4 minutes. Then at the next session, you go, okay, well, look, can you look at a picture of a spider? And then you look at a picture of a spider, and then they look at it, and then they look at another picture. And then eventually you say, look, you're going to come in the next session, there's going to be a box in the room, the spider's going to be in a box. Could you tolerate that? And they say, all right, well, I'll see, I don't know. So then they come to the session, and they know that the spider is in there. And the point is, you don't wrap them in cotton wool, you make them stronger.
Yeah.
You
hold them by the hand and you lead them
who
through
can act
stronger and stronger iterations of exposure to that
Exactly,
thing they're
exactly.
scared of. You don't say, I will protect you from spiders.
You don't make life unsafe, because you can't do that. You can't escape the dangers of life. What you can do is make a child who's strong enough that when they encounter the problems of
pick
life,
themselves
they
up
can deal with
and
it
carry
or
on.
avoid them or
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
Yeah,
But that's
agreed.
emboldening, and that again is you can bring back to these old ancient religious stories.
Yeah.
They're trying to empower.
Yeah.
They're trying to avoid the 7 deadly sins, not by running away from them, but by facing them and and learning how to protect yourself from it. In other words, how to act well. That's what religious truth is. It's how to act. It's not about what is the material structure of a compound and so on. It's how do you act well when you're confronted by one of the sins, or the temptation, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, or vice. And
It's
you can call
making
it
you
sins.
stronger
The
rather
philosophers
than
would say
protecting.
vices. Vice-like behaviour,
Yeah.
virtuous behaviour, they're counterposed. But when that vice-like urge kicks in, what is your incentive to not give into it?
Yeah.
Because all
And
of those
you gotta-
7 deadly sins, apart from envy, are pleasurable.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
And it's actually rational. It's like, why shouldn't you avoid that? You can make a perfectly rational argument for being an absolute arsehole and stealing things from whoever you want.
Yeah.
Rationally speaking,
Yeah.
you can do that. But it's actually something deeper in human psychologically that stops you from doing it. It's not irrational. You can make a rational argument. Like, look, if I'm bigger than you, why don't I just take your money? I like money, I need it. I'll just take it from you. And it's like, well, no.
You can make a rational argument in a very small context, but if you widen the context, if you took money for her, then what are we going to do?
Exactly, right? So then the social contract evolves.
Rational
But
argument for doing these immoral acts.
Yeah.
If you widen the context.
But that's where
that's an
morality
interesting point,
evolves
yeah.
from. Yeah.
So it's not just the
that's
one-on-one.
where morality comes from.
Because it takes away your responsibility of thinking. It says, look, these are the answers. Just follow this, do this. You don't have to think about it. What you want is for people to think for themselves about the wider
Agreed,
picture
wholeheartedly.
and to actually take responsibility for their actions based on their own understanding of the wider consequences of what they do. And religion doesn't do that. Religion gives you the answer.
Okay, but
it doesn't tell you
Isn't it a good start? Absolutely.
Starting point. So remember that religions were born in an era where education was available only to the lucky few. It's only in recent times that the knowledge has become available to make those decisions for yourself. But much more recently, right? You had to be rich to get an education back in the day. No, you had to be rich to gain access to the knowledge. Whereas you could be poor as a church mouse and walk in through the door of a church.
You can be poor, you can be illiterate, you can be poor, and still make good decisions by thinking, using your brain, thinking.
I misunderstood your point.
Truth is fundamental.
I misunderstood
That
your
truth
point.
is fundamental.
But I still
Exactly.
think the information has to be introduced from without as in it doesn't come from within. I don't think there's
You have the
any.
reality, and you work, and you learn for yourself through experience how reality works. You
But
don't get told how
I
reality
think,
works.
sir, respectfully, you're an intelligent man and you're coming from the perspective of how you've done this in your life. But not everyone is thusly equipped. Not just that they're born not clever enough to do it, but that the influence is impinging on them.
Exactly. Religion is giving people this filter of how to look at the world, instead of giving them nothing and then getting them to look at the world for themselves. Religion is bad because.
But our natural state of being is much more Hobbesian. I mean, I come from a Hobbesian point, right?
Who is Hobbes? Not everyone's going to know what that means.
Okay, sorry. So Hobbes spoke about
Thomas Hobbes, right?
Thomas Hobbes essentially spoke about what he described as a state of nature, like really animalistic, tribal. I am going to take your money because I'm bigger than you, kind of thing, right? And then once you get up to 150 people, as you were saying, we start we start to move beyond our tribalistic requirements, because once populations start getting above a certain size, that tribalistic thing just isn't. You have to get to a point where you start benefiting the whole, and then you start developing what another guy called Rousseau called the social contract, which starts to become a more sophisticated, socialized set of principles.
But can you find them from within? Because his argument is, without having people brainwashing you, you should be able to find your own moral direction.
No,
I'm not sure that's
the
right.
assumption is that morality is Hobbesian, which it isn't.
They're people. They're not people.
No, agreed. But they were
the natural state's Hobbesian. It's not Hobbesian. It's not moral.
Yeah, but
The natural human state of nature is not a sophisticated moral state. That's something that we grow.
That's what I mean.
Well,
morals. So long as the intelligentsia in your community say, when they say, "Do you want the brain?" and you go, "Oh my God, I would do it."
Yeah. And it's evolved over tens of thousands of years through social interaction and passing on the stories of how to behave morally within structures. And that's really what religion is. It's a documentation of how that social contract has evolved over 100,000 years since the first Homo sapiens. That's essentially all it is. It doesn't mean there's an afterlife. It just means it's a blueprint and a documentation of how the social contract has evolved over time. Yeah.
Thanks very much for your insights. I think it's time to go to the pub.
I think that's probably a good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your name? Leon. Nice to meet you, Leon. Thanks a lot. I look forward to seeing you. Jack. Dr. Jack.
I don't think you need 100,000 years.
Leon. So,
Homo sapiens are like
Don't
70,000.
you need a family? You just need your own family.
Is it like months or is it?
Yeah, but there's probably a grandmother and grandfather somewhere who gave the family ideas of how to structure.
Oh, right, so
when you first have your first kid, it's like, how do I do this? I'll ask my mum. I'll ask my grandma.
I don't separate grandfather and grandfather.
So it's always a few days later.
It's on two different things. It's not outward information. That's internal information amongst the
Well, it's internal in one sense, but the whole nature of evolution is that things evolve over time. And the Enlightenment's only 400 years old, right? So before rationalism, there was a substructure of sophisticated common values and truths that make up the foundation on which atheism itself was even able to evolve. And weirdly, atheism came from the Christian obsession with truth. And when you take truth to the ultimate point, you begin to get rationalism and atheism, right? So ironically, almost, Christianity created the very thing that ended up destroying it, which is atheism. It's not a coincidence atheism evolved from the West and from a Christian substrate. That's not a coincidence. And Nietzsche spoke about it. Nietzsche said, we have destroyed God. What did he say? We have killed God. I can't remember the precise quote, but he said, we've evolved to the point, we have rationalism, we have now killed God, but the next point is, and there will be innumerable deaths as a consequence. Now, he didn't like Christianity, he was quite against it. He was fundamentally an atheist in an intellectual sense, but he recognised that the religious substructure that we're built on, however flawed or however rationally incorrect or whatever you want to call it, is actually the thing that enables your family to have these shared ideas. It's the thing that enabled the social contract to evolve in the first place, which makes us different to the Hobbesian state of nature, just random apes running around raping and killing each other if we happen to be stronger. You know, so if you take away the religious substruction, you just have rationalism left. It's not a state that the human psyche is able to deal with, and I think, yeah. I mean, look at what happened in the 20th century.
In
what context?
The 8 ladies has been raped, comes back, she's stressed out. You totally understand, you empathise with her as part of the trial.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Well, if you're part of a moral tribe, yeah. Well, but you're assuming empathy is a natural starting point.
Oh, really?
Right? Because if you were a Nazi and you saw a Jewish woman raped, you might rejoice in her suffering. And that was only 70 years ago, and that was in Europe, right? So you see, when ideology becomes corrupt, when rationalism starts to persuade you that 2 + 2 = 4, you know, Jew equals animal, and just fundamentally evil, then your rationalism can override what should be an empathic response, and then you can rejoice in the suffering of another human being purely because of their religion, right? Rationalism untamed by some kind of moral substructure can result in Nazism, can result in Stalinism, can result in Maoism.
And then those atheists, they tended to experience.
Well, rationalism is not fundamentally moral. It doesn't have to be. Rationalism is just what can be rationally defined in action. So, like I said, like if I needed money, I could just steal it from someone who I could overpower. Like, there's nothing rationally wrong with that. It's like, I need money, I'll take it. It's immoral, but then morality is a whole different subject. It's not necessarily to do with rationalism. Morality and rationalism are not, you know, they can be mutually, well, they are mutually exclusive. I mean, you know, the logic within Nazism, if you want to take it forward, is rational. It's certainly not moral.
Yeah, there's another body of research about that.
That's the kind of thing Jesus would say.
Morality from that. Everything goes together, because then you'll say, I'm not going to be the kind of person who does that to somebody. That's scary. Because I've already judged that I empathise with this person, I understand that to be fact.
I mean, I think that's how you would act, and that's how I would act. But I think you're projecting your very complicated set of behavioural beliefs, which I would probably argue come from a Christian substrate, probably because you've evolved from a Christian culture. I'm making assumptions there, but you were probably born in a Christian culture. Well, there you go. And the lessons your grandmother and your ancestors have passed on to you have come from a Christian cultural place. And those moral things, they're not scientific, they're not rational. I mean, they make logical sense when you put them out. But these are very ancient things, and they go right back to when we were cavemen. And we've evolved psychologically to respond to them. I mean, that's why we like stories, that's why we like films. That's why we enjoy watching the arc of a hero in a film. They start out as weak and not knowing, and then they move forward and they overcome obstacles and they become a hero. So all human civilizations love this hero story, because we feel in our heart that it's something that we could aspire to. That's why people like Harry Potter, that's why people like Star Wars, right? That's why people read the Bible. The stories that have at their core truth. And forget about the supernatural. It's an archetype, it's a metaphor. But there's truth within it. And that's why we respond to it. It's the same. Harry Potter and the Bible may as well be the same in terms of the hero stories. You know? And that's why people like it.
Would you be happy with religion reintroduced to society on a very primitive level? Family religion, nature worship, that kind of thing. Why does it have to be state-sponsored, sophisticated?
No, yeah, it doesn't have to be that. Absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of organised religion necessarily. I'm certainly not a fan of the misuse of religion. But the fundamental truths within these stories are just passed on. They're blueprints of how we behave anyway. You know, it's like a documentation of human behaviour, psychologically speaking, over time. And they're way older than even writing. There was an oral tradition before the written tradition. So you know, you go to the Mesopotamians, they were writing the same stories with the same truth as the Christians, as the Muslims, these are just the stories that human beings pass on because they're true. It's like, yes, son, this is what you should do when the following happens, and they've been saying that, forever.
You know when you write a novel, any, say for example, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
She wrote the first one, like 8 years ago, and then she wrote the second one, the last one. There's a difference of 10 years now. You look at the grammar and you see that the grammar's improved a lot.
Yes, which has evolved.
Normal for humans when they write. They
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and it becomes more metaphorical and more sophisticated.
The Quran was revealed over a 23-year period. 23 years. That's the key.
Yeah.
And if it was compiled by Muhammad alone, or if you want to go where he had many people, there's a scientist that works out, like for someone novel writing, they can work out, like a signature, someone's signature, they can see the personality characteristics of the person. The same way when they write a novel, they can do like a rhythm thing to see the emotional tone of the different types. I don't know, I've not done it myself, but there is a formula, sound proven.
Yeah.
They did it with the Quran, and there's not one change in that rhythm. So over a 23-year period, bearing in mind for months, some revelation never came to me. So it's over 23 years. This book has got no rhythm change. So it's written by one person.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you explain? You've never heard this said to you before, so maybe because you're coming on the angle about these are stories, like the Bible. Yes, it is.
I was aware of how Gabriel revealed the Quran.
The Bible is written by men. Handwritten by men, that men had prophecies. They wrote down something's going to happen in the future, things like that. But with the Quran, we believe it physically came down, letter per letter, from the angel to Muhammad.
Yes.
Every word. And a lot of people say this was written by Muhammad. If that's the case, and how is it possible that for 23 years, the writing style has not changed once?
Yeah.
And it's written by one person. And if it was written by one person...
Part of the miracle was that Muhammad couldn't read or write. So that's actually part of the prophetic miracle of that story. Because he couldn't write. And therefore, how did he know? It was revealed by the Archangel Gabriel. And so, I mean, it's hard to tell whether it... I mean, it's hard to tell any of it because it happened in a place with sort of no witnesses and so on. But my interest in religious truth isn't to do with literalism. In fact, the details aren't really very relevant as far as I'm concerned. In terms of the utility and the value of religion.
But even if there were no witnesses that didn't see the angel, they were, by the way, they did see the angel sometimes. He would then say, they would ask who's that person because they would not know who this person was talking to Muhammad. And as this person walked away all gleaming white, he would say that was the angel Gabriel. Which I'm going to do soon. He never once spoke a lie. So even if he came...
So he never what?
He was known as someone who never spoke a lie.
He never spoke a lie?
One lie. He was known in the community. He was like nicknamed the trustworthy one. They could come to him and say, Mohammed, can you look over my stuff? Like jewelry. There was no banking system. So he was like the trustworthy. They could come to him for decisions.
It's not easy to prove that
he never lied once. It's not recorded once. Intentionally. When I say lie, I mean intentionally.
Thanks, I'm going to go now.
All right, take care.
What's your name, by the way?
Alex, yeah. I'll have a look on the thing.
I told him to email me so I can get the name of his channel. I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, sure.
Content over everything from your man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to
terrorists, can only be hired by governments. You understand? Hillary Clinton has already confessed to setting up these organizations. So it has nothing to do with the religion.
Exactly.
You understand?
This
it's
is
a front, innit?
We're going all I'm trying to say is a very simple thing. I meet someone, I like them.
Right.
If I don't care what your ideology, I will argue with you. But if I like you, I like you. You're a human being, and I'll get on with you. So when people keep saying, "Oh, all Salafis are bad," or "all these persons are bad,"
We don't say all Salafis.
I'm just saying